First off, thank you, Dr. Shaw, for meeting with me today.
My pleasure. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. So tell me what you currently been up to in the last few months.
In the last few months, we've retired, moved to the Cape. So we've left the campus where we lived for 27 years, and we're settling into a new and learning a new type of life. Where you don't have every minute of your day booked and all kinds of extra commitments and things. So it's been kind of a interesting learning experience.
Now, when you say it's an interesting learning experience, and then based off the background that I know of you working at Dean, what elements do you think Dean and other colleges have helped you figure out what you're trying to do now currently?
It's a good question. I think it was a combination of all along the way. I started in higher education around 1976,
Hmm.
and it was a matter of learning along the way then what I was good at, what I
Hmm.
enjoyed doing, what I was good at doing, and getting a chance to learn how to do that better. And my number one was always working with students. I always enjoyed that the most. And in all the different places that I've worked, that was what I was allowed to do. And that's what worked out best for me. So it's helped me to continue down here now to look at what do I like to do, how can I do it, and how can I learn to do it better.
Right. Now, going off of just my experience with you at Dean College, what were your responsibilities during that time that you were working there?
Main responsibility was to try and identify and meet students' needs. And that was tasked basically by leading faculty in the School of Business when I was the dean, or just as a professor working with other faculty to try and identify those needs and make sure we were meeting them,
Mm.
and to come up with new and different ways of trying to do things. So it wasn't, if you'll recall your time there, it wasn't the old stodgy traditional come in, take a test and go home type of thing. It was we tried to get a lot of different speakers. We tried to get a lot of different experiences for students to go see places.
Mm.
Um, the sports management people always got tours of Gillette and other facilities. The criminal justice folks got the same kind of thing, different tours and different meetings with different people. So it was a matter of trying to figure out, all right, how do students learn,
Hmm.
and how can they learn to be successful in a profession, not just being book smart.
Now, with that being said, for those who are in business or those who currently are students that are trying to break out and create their own thing, what types of advice pieces would you give them?
The first is there's no such thing really as failure. It's just you learn something that's not working
Hmm.
at the moment. Now, it may work a few years from now. You may look and say, well, that didn't work at this time, but with what I've learned from it not working, maybe a couple of years from now, it might work. So you don't forget just because it didn't work. It's not something you just wipe out and never try again.
Hmm.
Um, but when you look and think, all right, what is the best thing to learn? We've had a number of students who have graduated or who are pretty successful entrepreneurs. We've had others who are finding spaces in larger companies
Hmm.
where they fit very well. and they're becoming pretty successful and rising up. We've got a couple like you that have different podcasts
Hmm.
and are sharing what they're doing, going into all different kinds of things. So we've had a number of business students who have gone into different trades or different businesses and are being pretty successful. We've got a number of dancers who had business as a second major who have their own studios now. We have a number of students who graduated and then went into aesthetics
Hmm.
and have their own hair salons and different things like that. But they had to learn how to run a business so they could keep that business side of, it's one thing to be able to teach people to dance or to take care of people's hair and things like that. But if you don't know how to run the business, you're not going to be able to do that for long.
Right.
So the business side of things, I think we were pretty successful at helping them learn that. And we gave them plenty of opportunities by requiring internships. We were one of the first out there to require the internship, not just to offer it. But that kind of work experience by requiring it and then getting feedback from other people is helping them to be successful today. So that's what we were able to do.
Which is great to hear.
Well, it is. I mean, it's always cool when you have somebody get in touch and say, "This is what we're doing now." We had dinner with a student during the summer who's in the arts, with a sculptor,
Oh.
and great things. We've had, we brought back for the Leadership Institute a dancer who's got now 2 dance studios and is doing pretty well. And connecting on LinkedIn, you can keep
Hmm.
up with some of them. So you see some students who are doing some really pretty amazing things, and that's pretty cool to see.
Now for you, I know when I was there, during my time there, they talked about the dean difference. What does that mean to you?
The dean difference was a thing that President Rooney kind of created as our brand, and it was
Hmm.
basically because Dean was lucky enough to not have the traditional type of president, but got somebody from the student affairs area,
Hmm.
really cared about students. So it was a student-centric model that really centered on working with students, providing the services that students needed to be successful, whether that was extra time, whether it was a lower number of, instead of 5 courses a semester, 4. It was the one-on-one coaching.
Hmm.
It was the academic tutoring. It was working with the faculty who all bought into and supported the brand to say, look, this is the way we're going to do this. For some students, it might be doing a podcast
Hmm.
will be acceptable for a final exam instead of having to do the traditional thing. It was a matter of meeting students where they were
Hmm.
and providing an education to them so they could be successful. But on the other side of it too, it was also from the internal piece of it, working as a community to help the college be successful. When Dr. Rooney got there, the place was going under. And without her, there would have been no Dean College. So it was a matter of doing that turnaround, and the faculty and staff
Hmm.
buying into that. Once a year at Dean, there's a ceremony where, I mean, it's not a big ceremony, but it's a thing where they honor all the students, or all the faculty and staff rather, who have been there for a number of years. And every year there's 1 or 2 people who have been there over 30,
Oh, wow.
over 25. It's every 5-year increments. So the number of staff and faculty who have stayed because it's a welcoming community of people who love working together, and that's what was the dean difference for a lot of us. It was working with each other and taking care of students. That's what we wanted to do. It's why we got into it, and that's what kept us there.
Now, one of the questions that I sent over to you was, do you think there's a difference between Merrimack College, Dean College, and Boston College? Do you think there is a difference, or do you think they all share the same line of like what they're trying to achieve?
They're all different
Hmm.
in the sense that they've all got different missions. So when you look at their mission,
Hmm.
it's like we taught in the school of business. Every business has to have a mission statement and
Right.
then follow that and be faithful to that. Okay. So you've got a Boston College. I got my doctorate there. Okay. They're a Catholic institution that does a lot of research.
Hmm.
That's a lot of different, they're a much different size. Okay. They're much bigger. Um, and they're loyal to that, which is keeping them very successful. They just raised over $1 billion in a campaign over a couple of years. Okay, so they do very well. Merrimack College is a Catholic college also,
Hmm.
and they've been growing into different things. They've now, I think, taken more of their sports up to Division 1 and doing different things like that. Um, but again, it's that Catholic brand, it's that Catholic identity that they're trying to hold on to and to keep things going. Okay. And they're pretty successful at that. And they're not nearly as big as BC. And then Dean College has the Dean difference. It's a
Hmm.
non-sectarian college. So it's not got one religious tradition that everybody's loyal to or anything. But it's got a student-centered approach that is not research
Hmm.
centered. So everybody's got a different mission. If they didn't, then why would it would just be a matter of price orientation. People would look to go, well, who's the cheapest? Because they're all the same. So everybody, in order to survive,
Hmm.
has to be different. They've got to create their own mission and they've got to be loyal to that, or else it's all going to stay. It's not, especially as the economy has gotten tough and everything else. There's fewer students out there. So everybody's hustling right now because it's the only way you're going to still be around in 5 or 10 years. But the number one key is to put that mission together and then stay faithful to that. And I think BC and Merrimack are good examples of places that are working hard to stay with their mission. Dean, I think, has been very faithful to their mission over the years. When that got put together 28 years ago, 29 years ago, and continued to deepen it and continued to recruit doing that
Hmm.
and welcome people into that community. And I think that's made it very successful. So I think if you're going to be faithful to your mission,
Hmm.
there are some people that won't like that mission. There are a number of students when you would ask them, well, why did you come to Dean, for example? And they'd say, well, I wanted a small school. Well, Dean fits that bill.
Hmm.
Okay. Other places, when I was at BC doing my degree there, you'd ask people, why did you come to BC? I mean, well, they wanted a big school. They wanted a big athletic program that they could go to the games and all that kind of stuff. Merrimack, it was a smaller Catholic college. And at Merrimack, there's a fair number of legacy there too. So their parents went there, and it's a family thing to go. And all three provide good, solid educations. It's just what's the student looking for, and how do you?
Hmm.
So I think the mission is the key piece.
Now, going off of that and talking about your experience, what was it like at Boston College during your time there?
I was only there as a grad student,
Mm,
so I didn't have a whole lot of, um, I wasn't involved in the student activities and things like that. I mean, I bought a season ticket to the football season when I was there. But I don't recall going to more than just a couple of the basketball games. Um, and now since I was there, they switched into the ACC. Um, so my experience at BC from a student perspective wasn't really impactful because
mm,
I only, all my classes were in the evening. So I really wasn't around in the daytime. And
mm,
then undergrad students would be doing stuff. I was in class. So that was a very different thing. Now, from a professional experience, um, I was the intern for the executive vice president, a gentleman by the name of Frank Campanella, who was probably one of the best administrators that ever worked in higher education. We eventually, after I left BC and got my degree, and then got to Dean College, got Frank to serve on the board of trustees at Dean. He became the chair of Dean, and he and Dr. Rooney on the financial side really turned the place around financially. So professionally, I got a lot out of BC. But as a grad student, you would hope to do that. If you're in a research, like if you were in a science, you would want to be doing more research than the
mm.
undergrad, you know. But it was a very different experience for me. My undergrad experience was at Villanova. That was totally different. I was manager of the basketball team. I was involved in a lot of different things in the campus ministry program there. And it was a pretty impactful experience for me. But the BC experience, and then Merrimack was even different because I only worked at Merrimack. I wasn't a student at all,
Mm.
and was really involved with the students. But it was totally different. Each place has been different for me.
Now, over the course of the last X amount of years that you worked, and then also now that you've retired, and congrats for that as well. What would you say? Would you have done anything differently over the course of time, or no?
There's always some things that you would say, well, maybe if I did this a little different, it may have gone a little differently. I mean, that's what, go back to the first question. That's what you learn, you know. You learn by failure. So if
Mm,
things fail, they don't work the way you wanted them to, and it goes that way. Um, so I'd probably have done a couple things a little differently, but basically with the main thrust of where I'm going, no, I think um, if you're paying attention to what's going on around you and you're making your decisions based on your experience and what you're learning about yourself and
mm,
that the world around you is going, then I think ultimately you're going to have the right direction. But sometimes you make a little wrong turn, but that's when the GPS keeps saying, "Hey, turn around."
right.
So you come back to what you want to be doing. So ultimately, yeah, I think I'm happy with what I've done. I'm happy with what I'm doing now. You're still learning and seeing what's going on.
Now, for when people want to learn more about themselves and more about what they're trying to get out of life, what advice would you give to those individuals?
Get a mentor. Um, get somebody that you can occasionally, and I don't mean a therapist or anything like that, but I'm talking about somebody who can help you by asking the right questions at times and looking at you and saying, are you going in the right direction? Are you happy doing this? What are you learning? Just can ask you some questions that help you reflect on what's going on and to discern where you're going. And when you're doing things like that, I think that's the most helpful thing because you can sit back and navel gaze and think about, what you're doing, but
Mm,
it's not really, you need somebody to kind of bounce it off.
right.
And I think a mentor is the best for that. So um, it's not anything necessarily formal,
Mm,
not hiring people. I know people out there that are work coaches and all these other organizations that make a lot of money trying.
Hmm.
But I think you want somebody that you have a good relationship with, and whether that's somebody higher up in the hierarchy in a bigger organization who can help you grow in that organization,
Hmm.
or somebody that's just in the industry. I've always tried to have somebody in the industry that was higher than me, much smarter than me, be able to help me look at different things and say, why don't you think about this? Why don't you think about that? My son is out in LA now working, and he's got the same thing. He's got a couple different people that are in the industry that he calls, every few months. Maybe he has a cup of coffee with him or just talks for an hour on the phone.
Hmm.
We'll say, what about this? What about this? They can also help you network because they know all these different people, and they can point you in different directions. And every now and then, out of the blue, somebody might call and say, I was talking to so and so, and they're looking for somebody, and you came to mind. Why don't you give them a call? So they can help that way too. But I
Hmm.
think it can just help you generally with where you're going and how you're getting there. So my advice to everybody is to have some kind of a mentor.
And then it sounded like you had a few over your lifespan of like working and currently what you're doing now.
Yes, I had different mentors, um, in different places, in different ways. So
Hmm.
when I moved to Miami, I had a mentor who helped me think about, okay, let's look at what you're doing. Um, is this the industry you want to stay in? Do you want to stay in higher education? And if you do, all right, then it's time to start thinking about getting a doctorate, because you're about as high as you're going to go now, and you're not going to make that next step without a doctorate. So it's time to think about going back to school.
Hmm.
And then he helped me figure out which program to get into, to apply to, which to go. Um, there was another, I had another one who helped me get through the program. I had another one who helped me after I got through, get used to working on a senior team at a college and things like that. So the mentors are people who can really help you, to grow as a professional, grow as a person. And, they're not a formal counselor. They're not, anybody who's going to be doing therapy or anything like that. But they're good at looking and saying, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What did you think when you did that? Why did you try that? That's not what you're good at. And it helps you continue to grow all the time.
Now, with that being said, and continuing to grow and going back on your experience at Dean, what are currently the partnerships Dean has with other organizations, and what ways do you think Dean has been able to obtain those over the years?
Well, I think first of all, it was, you have to be open to partnerships, which
Hmm.
means, and for a lot of people, that's hard. I mean, it doesn't sound hard, but for a lot of people, it's hard to admit they're not the one to do everything. You've got to say, well, this person does this much better than me. So if I partner with them, why not have them do it?
Hmm.
Like and Dr. Rooney understood that for the college early on. So, for example, before you were even around there, they had a program with Suffolk University. They had a school of business dean who was open to working with Dr. Rooney, who looked and said, why don't we teach courses on your campus? So students could get, at that time, Dean was only a 2-year program.
Hmm.
So you were able to go to Dean your first 2 years, get your associate's degree, and stay at Dean and get your bachelor's degree from Suffolk, and continue to stay at Dean and get your MBA from Suffolk.
Oh, wow.
Because Dean looked and said, well, that's not what we do right now. Let's partner with somebody who can do that and still appreciate who we are. We appreciate who they are, and it works together. Dr. Rooney put together a partnership with the craft group that really pulled some things that other schools never even thought about.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped us to go and move to the required internship and different things along those lines, because we had this partnership with the craft group, which, remember, is not just the Patriots,
Mm-hmm.
not just even sports management. They own over 80 companies. So students were able to get into data analysis and marketing and all these other areas that were great opportunities for them. And it worked out really well for all of them to be able to do that. So that was a great partnership. And when you're able to know yourself well enough to say what you don't do very well, and you're willing to work with somebody who can do that very well
Mm-hmm.
and appreciates you for what you do very well, partnerships are the best, I think, the best way to go. And then you start to put people to work with around you that appreciate that also. So you can bring in people who are there just to speak, who are there to work part-time or full-time, who can then help you fulfill your mission and bring that mission to other people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for a lot of places, people's egos get in the way. They don't want to bring in somebody else who might do something very well and get the fanfare. So they want to be the star. But if you're a good partner, you're not looking to be the star. You're looking to be successful. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the way to do it.
Now, in addition to that, what were your responsibilities as a chair of the board?
I was the chairman of the board of the YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
And my job was to lead the board and to make sure that the organization was moving in the right direction. The Hockomock area YMCA was a very successful organization. They hired an incredible CEO, Ed Hurley, who just retired also, who did a great job putting that together. And it was a turnaround. It was just like Dean. They were not doing well. The Franklin site was falling apart, literally. So, we made the decision, not when I was the board, but I was on the board, but not the chair, but we made the decision, we got to fix that up.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a beautiful site with a beautiful piece of property and doing real well. The North Attleboro site was falling apart. We had a small site, very small site in Mansfield at the time that we were using. It was an old primary school that we rented for $1 a year. And we were able to use that with some exercise stuff to
Mm-hmm.
take care of Mansfield, Foxborough, Plainville, and those areas, and Sharon. And then with Ed's help, he went out and raised some money, made some partnerships with, at that time, it was called the Foxborough Company, who gave us the property in Foxborough that we then were able to build that property for the Foxborough Y.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that is under the organization of the Hockomock Y. So it's got the different sites, covers 15 towns. So when I took over as the board chair, you were in as the chair for only 2 years. It was a limited term, did 2 years, and then you got down as, and I stayed on the board after that.
Mm-hmm.
But you were leading the board with the organization. I met regularly, a couple times a month with Ed Hurley as the CEO. And again, made sure we developed, for the first time when I was there, when I was the chair, we put together a strategic plan. They had not been good at doing planning. They were just reacting to what was going on. But Ed turned that around and got them into the whole planning mode.
Mm-hmm.
We developed a strategic plan, and that worked out very well, helping them get a direction as to where they were going. And part of that process, is when you're putting together your plans, you clarify your mission. So we clarified the mission statement, and they've been very successful since then. But it was a matter of for me, leading the board, helping the board understand what we were doing, who we were, where we were going. And what did we do? We were not a state social organization. We were not a religious organization.
Mm-hmm.
And first, to a certain extent, you had to get people to understand that. I mean, everything about our title was different than what we really were. Right? If you think about what does YMCA stand for? Young, right? Young Men's Christian Association.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing we were really doing was associating. But we were taking care of senior citizens. We were taking care. The YMCA is the largest child care provider in the United States. So, we weren't just taking care of young. We were doing little kids. We were doing senior citizens. Then it wasn't just men, because majority of the membership for a while was we were like 52% women. So it wasn't just young men.
Mm-hmm.
It was not just Christian. We had Jewish members, Muslim members, all different kinds. And it was a very open organization who then got mistaken sometimes for a state organization for service, because nobody was excluded. So based on your income, you could still be a member of the Y. You didn't have to, pay certain dues, or you could get what we would call scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
Or grants or stuff to belong, or to have your kids go to summer camp. So it was very different that way. And part of the branding of the Y was getting people to understand it was open to everybody, regardless of who you were, how old you were, what religion you were, and how much money you had. There was no exclusion. And it was pretty successful. It was a good run.
Now, with that in mind, and with all you talked about over the past few minutes, what type of ways do you think businesses, whether that be nonprofit or just regular businesses for profit, attain their first customers, and how do you think they go about it in a way that doesn't seem just as like a copycat type of business, if you get what I'm saying?
Could you clarify the question a little bit?
Yes. So like when it comes to like nonprofit and business, how did it go about, for instance, like when you were rebranding the YMCA, how did they go about attracting new customers? Or does it go
Well,
always to the mission?
part of it, and even this with a lot of people, is getting people to understand that even though you're a not-for-profit,
Mm-hmm.
you're still a business. Okay. And you have to run yourself as a business.
Mm-hmm.
That means you got to have good management. You have to have solid financial standing and income, and solid financial management, so you're not spending more than you're bringing in.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not there to run up debt, or then you're not there anymore. So you got to be managing that. You've got to create a good brand. What makes the YMCA different than a social service from the state, or from the Big Brother, Big Sister,
Mm-hmm.
or similar organizations along those lines. And it was a matter of looking at different things and saying, how do we do all this? So even though we're a not-for-profit, we're a
Mm-hmm.
business. And if we don't have a surplus at the end of the year, then we haven't done a good job. We have to, we're not allowed by law to have a profit. So we
Mm-hmm.
call it a surplus. So if you look at the YMCA, for example, the Hockomock right now is doing some work on the children's gym in Franklin and some other places. North Attleboro has a project, and Foxborough has a project.
Mm-hmm.
That's because there was a surplus at the end of last year that by law, as a not-for-profit, you have to put back into the business. Okay. So we're not spreading that profit around. Nobody's getting dividends because they're on the board or something.
Mm,
So it's a matter of saying, all right, we did a good job managing. This is what we've got over. Now, how can we use that to meet the needs capital wise that we have for the organization? And that's where it goes. But you can't meet those needs if you don't manage well enough to get that surplus. And if you don't have a nice facility, well, then why are people going to pay to work out at your Y when they can pay $10 a month to go to Workout World or something else? So
mm,
you've got to meet their needs, but you got to do so in a way that really helps them to be successful and to stay true to who they are. So that's part of managing that not-for-profit, is getting people to understand, because a lot of people think, we ran into this at Dean all the time and every other place I've ever worked. People would think, why do you work at a not-for-profit? Because they don't pay. Well, I never got paid at the Y because I was a volunteer, and that's who runs the Y, is the board of directors.
mm,
But the executive director, the lifeguards, the camp personnel, the child care people are
mm,
all professionals who are trained in that specific area. You can't take care of little kids unless you're licensed. And there's all kinds of state regulations around how many can be in that place at the same time based on how many staff you have and stuff. You can't be a lifeguard unless you're certified. You can't do certain things. Well, those professionals have to be paid.
mm.
But a lot of people think, oh, it's a not-for-profit. Nobody's getting paid anything. Why would I want to have a career in a not-for-profit? My experience, I've worked except for a couple of years when I was at Coopers and Lybrand, I was with a not-for-profit my whole career. From 1976 on, I worked for not-for-profits. Colleges, hospitals, they're all not-for-profits. So you can do very well. You can make a nice career doing it,
Mm.
and take care of a family and everything else. But it's a matter of being part of the mission and making it happen. And for a lot of people, myself included, that's what you wanted to do. You wanted to be in the service industry. You wanted to be a servant. You wanted to take care of people and
Mm.
help people grow and things like that. That's what I wanted to do from the time I set out. Somebody asked me online the other day in a leadership discussion, who was one of your first role models as a leader? Well, my first that I really got into was Bobby Kennedy. And that was back in the 60s. And that's what I wanted to be like. I wanted to, take care of people, help them grow, help them be successful. And that's where I pushed my career to be. Okay. I wasn't about climbing the corporate ladder or any of that stuff. And I was always fulfilled in what I was doing. So I was happy with what I was doing.
Well, thank you for sharing your story today.
Well, my pleasure. It's good to see you again. So thank you for giving me a call. And if I can help in the future, let me know.
I definitely will. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, Joe. Have a good one.
You as well.